we're going to be looking at managing Azure storage. How do we get in and work with it? Of course, we've seen some of that at this point, but we need to talk about things like the Azure Storage Explorer, the AZ Copy utility, and the ability to import and export to Azure Storage. So Storage Explorer is a standalone application, and the idea is it just makes it easy to work with Azure Data Storage. You can do this on Mac, you can do it on Windows, Linux. You can access as many accounts and as many subscriptions as you need. This is not really intended for users per se. It's really more for administrators and developers potentially to be able to manage that storage. Connection capabilities, you can connect to storage accounts that are associated with the subscription to which you have access. You could also connect to storage accounts and services shared from other subscriptions. And you can connect and manage local storage even by using the Azure Storage Emulator. So you can work on things in the cloud, but also work on external storage on-prem as well as local storage on that system. In this demonstration, we're going to be looking at the Azure Storage Explorer utility and the options that it provides for you. So we just go to any storage account really, and we've kind of looked at this, but we did not yet click Open in Explorer. And when you click on Open in Explorer, it's going to say, oh, you have to download this Azure Storage Explorer, because all that really is doing is a link to open it up in a program that already exists. Instead of hitting OK, I need to go click I want to download it, or I would have had to just go out and say that you wanted to download the Azure Storage Explorer before. This is not really for users. This is for admins, but it does make it easier to navigate that storage, and to be able to kind of manipulate the data that is inside of it. So it's a good thing to go ahead and install on an administrative workstation. That way you can access these storage accounts in this easier fashion. All right. But just to be clear, we're mapping users to file shares possibly. We're not having users utilize the Storage Explorer component. Okay, so when that is finished, we just click that to launch it. So it starts up the Storage Explorer utility. First things first will be just to access a particular subscription. We get just kind of some generic information here, but it'll pop up, okay, do you want to connect to a storage resource? Now you can connect to individual shares, we can connect to individual blob containers, or we can just get access to a particular subscription. Where does the subscription reside? It's in Azure. Then we're going to need to sign in. You may be able to take advantage of a session that you're already signed in with. Okay, so there we go. And that actually links us to these, and then we can open in Explorer. And the beauty of doing it that way is you actually have access then to everything. The Marco demo is there, then my storage account. So you've got all the different kinds of storage accounts that have been created here. We'll go to PL demo storage. We can expand that. And then within each item that you expand, you would see, in this case, it's files. So we're seeing file shares, right? And we expand that and it's taken a second, but then we'll see, okay, there's my test file share. And here is the data that it contains. Okay. Now, again, this was one that I had created before, but you notice here we can create new folders. We can connect virtual machines to it. We can upload, download files from it. If you had files in other locations, so like here, my blob store backup, you can take and you can copy from one to another, all of those kinds of things. So it's just simply more of a file level access to these locations, and you can get access to anything in the storage account within the subscription that you're connecting to. So not for user consumption, but from an administrative perspective, this is going to make it so that we can access these. You can go over here and manage. You can open the connect dialog box again. Okay, so if we wanted to access, say, a particular share, then at that point, it's going to want the SaaS URL. All right, so depending on how you connected, we connected to the subscription by signing in. But you can connect to individual storage accounts, individual file shares. Your connection will be slightly different. Okay, that'll use that shared access signature URL that you would then have to generate. All right, so that was just a quick look at the Azure Storage Explorer, an easy way to navigate and manage storage in the Azure storage services. Now, in many scenarios, you get a lot of data that needs to be sent to Azure. And so we always have the option of uploading that data, but Microsoft provides an import-export service as well, because sometimes bandwidth constraints or other scenarios would not allow for over-the-network transfer. Import-export means you're actually going to ship your hard drives to the Azure data centers. And then the Azure, and then Microsoft would be responsible for importing your information into a storage account. Okay, so if you have hundreds of gigabytes or terabytes of data, then this would definitely be something that we would look to. You can also use this for content distribution, to quickly send data to customer sites, to do backups, to do data recovery. Okay, all of those things. Another tool that we have is AZ Copy. This is just an alternative method. This would be transferring over the wire, so to speak. And so AZ Copy is currently in version 10 of the command line interface, and we'll just use this for copying to and from. I haven't used this a whole lot, but I have used it to import PST files into Office 365. Okay? It supports a number of different kinds of file system or file sources, the storage accounts. It also does support Azure Active Directory for authentication, in addition to the SAS tokens, which we will, which we've kind of seen. That's that generic. This is a URL that I'm going to use to connect to storage. So we'll take a look at these, but those are a couple of other options, or a couple of options. One is shipping hard drives, and the other is copying things over the wire. We're going to look at securing Azure storage. Storage is important because it stores our data. We need it to be highly available, but we need to ensure that only authorized users can actually access that storage. And that's where storage security is going to come into play. Azure does provide a number of different options for customers to utilize to make sure the security of their data, both in motion and at rest, so as it's traveling over the wire, as well as when it's sitting in storage. And so we've already discussed that encryption is done automatically. Everything that's written to Azure Storage is automatically using what's called SSE, the storage service encryption. We have authentication to our storage through Azure Active Directory and role-based access control. So you can actually assign RBAC roles directly to a storage account for individuals. And then Azure AD integration is supported when you're using the blob or queue services. Encryption in transit is done either with client-side encryption or HTTPS or SMB 3.0. All of those use different types of encryption. Azure Virtual Machines will support full disk encryption, similar to BitLocker. And then we have the use of shared access signatures. Shared access signatures give us the ability to essentially delegate access to data objects. So here's this object, here's a URL that you can use to connect to it, and at any point I can cancel that URL if necessary. Now, first we have authentication, then we have encryption, but we also want to make sure that only authorized individuals are able to gain access. So every request that's made against a secure resource in blob, in file, queue, table, storage, it must be authorized. And here are your options. We can use Azure AD. That's the cloud-based identity platform. That's the, essentially the foundation for both Azure as well as Office 365, and in doing so, you can grant fine-grained access control to individuals. We have shared key authorization. Now, that relies on account access keys and other parameters, and what it does is it produces this encrypted signature string that then is passed with the request as a part of the authentication header. Okay, so that's not going to give you fine-grained access, but that gives them access. We have the shared access signatures, which delegate to a particular resource in the account and grant certain permissions over a particular period of time. Or we could allow anonymous access. So it depends on what is being stored as to which of those options we will choose. In this demonstration, we're going to look at controlling access to Azure storage. We've discussed this in a couple of different times, and then most recently, obviously, in this section about the ability to control based on identities in Azure AD or the ability to control based on shared access signatures or SAS keys. And so that's kind of what we're going to be looking at here, is just to make sure. So we can go to access keys. This is within a particular storage account. Okay, and you can generate these keys. This is how users would be authenticating against the application. So we can see the connection string, we can see the individual keys themselves and all of that. That's actually going to be used by your connection. Like if we were connecting to the file share and it generated that PowerShell script, this is the key that's being used. Those are the storage keys. That's what that's for. And again, I think at the time we said it really shouldn't be used for user access because it does not provide identity level management. So unless you have identity management turned on to the storage account, you shouldn't be doing this. Well, the SAS, the shared access signature, is going to be done here. Okay, and notice when I'm generating it, it's saying, okay, these are the services that are allowed. Now, apparently in this demo storage, I just have access to blob, but that's fine. Okay, so blob or file share or table or whatnot. Allowed resource types, we want them to be able to see containers and objects. And then the allowed permissions that they have, the deletion of versions, a start and end expiration, date and time. Okay, so this is like just for today. We're going to generate this for a week. I will give them to next week, what time zone, allowed protocols, those kinds of things. And then the signing key, which is just key 1 or key 2. You've got 2 of them in there. Generate this and the connection string. And so this is for a point in time access to this particular resource. So there are your connection strings. This is a SAS URL that is generated using those keys and would allow them to have at least a timed access to this storage location. Okay, that is very similar to what we saw at the file share, only the file share was just a permanent. We weren't specifying time, although I believe we had an expiration there we could configure, but it was just giving access to it in general. So this is done on a per storage account basis, can be done on a per blob or per container basis, per file share basis. The shared access signature is key, and you want to be able to understand and recognize the difference between that and user-based management. The Azure Storage Service encryption for data at rest is going to protect all of our data. It's also going to help us to ensure organizational security and compliance standards are always met. As we said, this is an automatic thing. Okay, so before storage, it's automatically encrypted. It's automatically decrypted before you are able to retrieve it. And the encryption is nothing to bat your eyes at. It's 256-bit AES encryption. So that's a industry standard. It is one of the strongest block ciphers that is available today. This is automatically enabled for all new and existing storage accounts, and then Microsoft will manage the keys for you. However, it is possible for you to manage your own encryption keys. If you do that, you would store them in a key vault. And the customer managed keys are going to give you a little bit more flexibility and control. Okay, so such as the ability to create keys, disable them, audit, rotate them, and just better define access control. There are some risks with some of these methods of securing storage, specifically with shared access signatures, as we noticed there. This is basically just a key that can be used to access. It does not try to identify who's accessing the data. The fact that you have that key means that you have access. So a couple of recommendations if you're doing that. All right, always use HTTPS to create or distribute it, because if it's passed over HTTP, then it's in clear text and it can easily be compromised. We want to reference the stored access policies. Those give you the option to revoke permissions without regenerating storage account keys. You want to utilize expiration dates so that it's just not ongoing. Carefully plan when it should start. That SAS should become available, and then be specific in terms of resources that are going to be accessed. So don't have these big broad SaaS URLs that are able to access all of the data in a particular storage account. And don't, this is not on the list, but don't always assume that it's the correct choice. We have to look at these risks. We have to look at who needs the access to the data and the type of access that they are going to require, and then make the best decision based on that information.